So last week we talked about Chai Sarah, how the name of the Parsha, everything in the Parsha is really hinted to and reflected in the name of the Parsha. And then we saw that Chai Sarah really, her legacy was that Yitzchok should be the inheritor, should be the continuation of the project of the Rabbanu Shalom, bringing this vision of bringing physicality and ruchnius, this achdas Hashem, the plan of Hashem, to fruition was going to happen through Yitzchok and not through Yishmael as well. It was just going to be through Yitzchok and through the Jewish people, and then as a global movement, but only through the Jewish people. And I hope everybody was if anybody paid attention to the Haftorah of last week's Parsha, that was what the entire Haftorah was about, the selection that David HaMelech, because of the intervention of Bathsheba, that he made and decided the inheritor should be Shlomo HaMelech. That was the whole, we don't know who the inheritor is, we don't know who the right inheritor is, and Bathsheba, Adoniah is trying to usurp the throne, and in the upcoming impending death of David HaMelech, and Bathsheba intercedes and make sure that David HaMelech make sure that it gets inherited by Shlomo HaMelech. So that was basically the whole thing of the parsha last week, and I hope that everybody appreciated that. So now we're moving on to Toldos, okay? And so Toldos, there's a question, right? The question is I'm not sure how much I'm going to stick to the words of the or be inside in the Sicha today. There are basically two Sichos that I want to kind of bring together here about basically trying to figure out the question of, in general, how Yitzchok was able to come out with Eisav, right? We see that even in the womb, Eisav and Yaakov were fighting in the womb. They were fighting in the womb, and when Rivka would go by the base medrash, when she'd go by the shul, one baby Yaakov would run around, and one would go by the base of Avodah Zarah, one would go by the church. Then Eisav would get all excited. Amen. How is it even possible for Yitzchok to have a child such as Eisav, that by nature seemingly was pulled after Avodah Zarah? Okay, so let's just read a little bit just to kick off here. Okay. Basically, we have to understand that there's two different modes of avoda from Avram and Yitzchok, right? Avram was chesed, and Yitzchok was gevura. Okay, so what are the two? We're going to see. This means the parsha means Toldos, kind of jumping off from last week, that the name of the parsha is really indicative of and reflecting the contents and the theme of the parsha. So this is the Toldos. These are the Toldos, not the Tolda, but these are the Toldos of Yitzchok. And the Parsha is very clear. The Midrashim are very clear that the Toldos include Eisav. That Eisav is one of the successors, or the Tolda, one of the products of Yitzchok. So Yitzchok and Rivka, they had Yaakov and Eisav. So when you have Avram, and you have Yitzchok, and then from that, you have Eisav and Yaakov. That should all make sense. Chesed, Gvura, and then when you have that together, when you have from Yitzchok, you should have Yaakov and Eisav. These are the two things that should emerge, okay? And we have to understand why. What is it about Yitzchok and following Avram that the products are Yitzchok and are Yaakov and Eisav? Eisav, who also seems to be a total Rasha, right? How could Eisav even come out of Yitzchok, especially when it seems like his internal inclinations were to do evil? How could this be? Okay. So we say that the avos hein merkava, the forefathers, they were the merkava, l'ratzon ha'elion. They were the ones who Avram Yitzchok. Let's just stick with Avram and Yitzchok. They didn't really have any. Feelings of their own. They didn't have any desires of their own necessarily. They didn't have any axes to grind. They had no battles internally to fight. They were the just like a chariot is totally driven by the driver. The chariot doesn't have a GPS system of its own. It's being driven by the driver. So when we say the forefathers were the chariot of Hashem, that means that they were kind of playing out this drama, this plot that Hashem had it fixed in the nature of creation. Avram, Yitzchok, and Yaakov, they're playing out this and laying the groundwork for what will be the process of redemption through the Jewish people of the Torah. We said last week that Yitzchok and Rivka, that was a proto Matan Torah. That was like the foreshadowing of Matan Torah. That the Maisa Avos, that what the Avos did, laid the groundwork, laid all of the piping and all of the piping, both in and especially in the upper worlds, whatever that means. They Hashem had placed them strategically in order that their movements in the world and their generations and what they will flower will turn out to be the process of Torah and the Jewish people and ultimately the awareness of Hashem throughout the whole world. Okay, so. Okay, so the question is, Masha Eisav Gadol Acharkach Lios Rasha Ein Ze Kushi Shari Kilkel B'Maisav Kol Adam Hu Bal Bechira Lin Hoy Kirtzoni V'Asu Bachar V'Eisav Bachar Asviva Knani Asher Anochi. So he says that it's so that basically we're trying to figure out how from Yitzchak could come Yishmael Harasha, right? We know that Yishmael did Eisav Harasha. We know that Yishmael did tshuva, later in life, but that Eisav became a Rasha. How could that be? Okay, so Yadua. So Abir Bezeh. This is the explanation. Yadua be'inyan Maisa Avos Siman Labanim. We're reading from the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Yadua be'inyan Maisa Avos Siman Labanim. Shemaisa Avos hu hanesinas koich lavodas abanim. The Maisa Avos. It's the giving of the strength. It's kind of putting the gas in the tank for the children, for Bnei Yisrael. Umizeh muvan shekol ofnei avodas Hashem hakaimen etzel habanim. And therefore, all the different ways we can possibly serve Hashem are going to be available or evident in the children in Am Yisrael. So there should be whatever avoda that is found among Klal Yisrael, however we can serve Hashem, there must be that there was an imprint or a siman in the avos. The avos must have had that element. So if we struggle in our life, if we deal with evil, we have our demons. So then that had to be somehow by the forefathers. The forefathers somehow had to have that as part of their avoda, because in order to lay the groundwork for the children, it had to be found in some element by the fathers. The fathers had to have all of that content there in order to inherit it, in order to bequeath it to the children. Okay? So Harambam Mishmona Prakim Avar Baruch Shnei Ofanei Avoda. There are two kinds of avoda. Hachased HaMa'ule, the Tzaddik Gomer, V'Hakovesh Yitzro, and the one who the Baal Tshuva. Okay? So basically there are two modes of avoda in this world. There's the Tzaddik Gomer, there's the Tzaddik, and there's the Baal Tshuva. There's the Kovesh Yitzro, the one who deals with evil. There's the one who's by nature doesn't really have to deal with evil. He's the Tzaddik Gomer. He never sins, right? He's a Tzaddik. He doesn't really sin. And the very few of those, few and far between. And then there's the majority of us where the job is to kovesh yitzro, to fight, to conquer, and to win over our evil inclinations. And that is this other element of avoda, the Baal Tshuva. And if this element is in the banim, if this is by the children, right? This is Klal Yisrael. We have word kovesh yitzro. Where did we see by the forefathers kovesh yitzro? There was no evil that they had inside of them. They were hein rakava. They were just following Hashem's flow. Whatever the flow was, they were totally in sync. They were not dealing with these with internal struggles. V'drusha v'hasbara ma'achar she'avos hein merkava kanal heicha nimsa b'maisa avos esimin labanim levis hakavish. So where do we see that they dealt with, that we see an imprint or a reflection of this, of fighting evil inside in the fathers who did not have to fight evil internally? They wanted what is the tikkun l'maisa bilti tov echi tachin she matzah tshuva b'maisa avos if they didn't do any ben l'chara yafshel l'taretz hafabiz avos kol mini yasmik. Okay, you have to pardon me. I'm trying to. I'm coming unprepared, and I'm trying to figure out how to get this idea across. Okay.
The idea that the actions of the avos prepare us for the.
Well, how is Eisav the product that you would expect to come out of Yitzchok? Okay, so I want to take a step back. Okay, I want to take a step back. I wasn't sure how to do it, but I want to take a step back. We understand that Hashem created the world. Okay, we understand that Hashem created the world. Right? We're still in Parshas, so we're still in Sefer Parshas, so it's still relevant to talk about Hashem creating the world. We talked about that Hashem really has two powers. Hashem has two strengths. He has two kochos. He can shine light, and he can restrict the light. He shines the light, and that's really the purpose of creation, right? What was the first thing that Hashem created? Light, right? And then he hid it, right? But the purpose of creation is the light. Is the light, that everything, that we should know that everything is Hashem. Ein od milvado, that despite the multiplicity, despite that we live in nature, we live in a finite world, that we come to the consciousness that everything is Hashem, as everything is really a manifestation of God's light. Okay? I'm taking a real step back. Okay? So in order that we can appreciate God's light, Hashem has to use his other koach of restricting light in order that we're not blinded by the light and therefore can actually appreciate the light, right? It's like changing the aperture. Letting, it's like a camera has the ability to take in light, or let's say give out light in this case, and to filter the aperture so that tzimtzum, that restriction, that hiding of the light is also a koach of Hashem, and the purpose of which is for the light. Meaning even the restriction of the light, the purpose is for the light, because in order for us to appreciate the light, Hashem has to restrict it into a certain sense, so that into a certain way that we can actually live as well and appreciate it and not be and have still bechira chavshis. If Hashem created the world in a way that the light was so overwhelming, without any limit, without any aperture, without any restriction on that light, then even if we would be able to understand that we have our own separate existence, which would be I don't know how you would be able to do that if it's just all light. There's no other existence. Hashem had to create a semblance of other to have this relationship. In order for us to appreciate the light, there has to be this other that thinks there's not light. So Hashem is, ultimately, it's through the multiplicity and the constriction and all of the restriction of the light is all for us to come to appreciate finally that it's all light. But we can only do it if Hashem hides it, and then we can live in this world, and then we are able to reveal the light through this world. The dira betachtonim, right, that Hashem is ultimately going to synthesize ruchnius and gashmius, and will ultimately, the physical world, which heretofore has been an obstacle to a relationship with Hashem, which is an obstacle to seeing the unity of God and the oneness of Hashem, and that everything is Hashem and there is no other power but Hashem. We think everything else has Hashem. We think this desk has power. We think everything has power. We think this desk has power to stand up, and the water has the power to make me unthirsty and give me koach, and the bank manager has power to put money in my account. Nothing has power but Hashem. That is ultimately the consciousness that we're achieving. But the depth of awareness that we are going to achieve is only possible through initially being hidden. the consciousness, the ultimate consciousness that Hashem wants, that there's nothing else but Hashem, can only be when we are faced with seeing alienation, seeing difference, seeing, feeling apart from, seeing and experiencing life as if there's something else than Hashem. Once we go through that experience, and despite the fact we're able to meek out some kind of ruchnius and do avodas Hashem from that place, then the appreciation and the awareness and the revelation of God's oneness through the physical world, not in spite of the physical world, but through the physical world, which is where everything is going to, that will be on such a much higher level that we would never have been able to appreciate had we not first have to go through the so-called darkness. Okay? It's the restriction of the light that allows us to appreciate the light. Yeah.
It doesn't have to be no light, just a little bit of light can create that same impact.
But Hashem's light is His light.
It restricts it to very little bit.
Exactly.
You still see a little of it.
Exactly.
You still see the future.
We're here. We're seeing it enough that we have the Hashem has restricted and hidden that light to such a fine aperture, to such a limited ability that we can actually live our life and think that Hashem doesn't even exist, right? There's so little light that we can actually delude ourselves and live a whole life. Intelligent people can live their whole life not thinking that Hashem exists. And even if we do believe that Hashem exists, but we still have a big problem when we get a flat tire thinking that it's all Hashem. Or when our paycheck comes in the bank to say, oh, thank you, Hashem. Even that I have a problem with. The light's so restricted is that I think that it's my boss that gave the money, or it's the neighbor that is causing me all this tsaras, or it's the doctor who can heal me, or it's the medicine that's going to work. And so even if I do believe in God, but still the oneness of His power is still hidden to me, and I still grapple with realizing that Einod Milvado, that it's only Hashem, that it's all Hashem. And ultimately, the greatest until that day. Yeah, until that day.
When
Hashem Echad U'Shmo Echad.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Until that day, what? Then I'm a non-believer, or I'm not in the game.
We're doing the avoda. We're doing the avoda of Koveshus Yitzro. We're doing the avoda of fighting the evil, of fighting the alienation, fighting the evil. What is evil? Evil is just a lack of perspective, right? Evil is just a lack of perspective. There's nothing in the world here that is other than Hashem. Hashem is behind everything. There is nothing. It wouldn't exist. It wouldn't exist except Hashem is powering it every single moment. Nothing can exist without Hashem's power. So the worst thing in the world, imagine the worst, most depraved thing in the world, Hashem's powering that. Hashem is powering that. He's thinking it. He's speaking it. It has kiyum. It exists in whatever form it exists because Hashem is bringing it into existence. So Ra is the same word, actually. Reish Ayin is the same word as Reya. Reya, which means broken, or friend. It means friend. It means friend. To say that if you are a friend, then it's not Ra. But if you're not a friend, if you don't connect it, if you're not a chaver, if you're not mechaber, remember chavron, if you're not mechaber, if you don't connect it to Hashem, if you don't connect this to the unity of Hashem, then it's Ra. Then it's Ra. If it's Reya, if it's a buddy, if it's a friend, if you link it up to Hashem, if you link it up to the purpose, it's not Ra. But when you break it off, it's Ra. Like Trua, the sound of right? It's the broken sound. It's broken. It's Reya. It's Ra. That's Reish Ayin. It's broken off. It's part of something bigger that is only Ra when it's not connected to its buddy, when it's not connected to the whole. So really, when we deal with evil is really only there in order to provide us with a conflict to then be able to see Hashem's oneness more. Is that's pretty clear, right? The whole existence of what we think is evil or is really just a way for us to be able to interact and choose Hashem. If we didn't have any perception of anything other than Hashem, there would be no value in our choosing Hashem. Right? If everything was just, if we saw Hashem so clearly, right? If we saw just the Hebrew letters and all the objects, and it was just, Hashem was there was such a clarity, then it wouldn't be a big deal for us to put on tefillin in the morning. It wouldn't be a big deal for us to daven and have a relationship with Hashem because we saw Him. It says that Hashem teaches us an angel teaches us the whole Torah while we're in the womb, and then we get patched right here to forget it. Why? Because if we didn't forget it, if we were remembering the Torah, the entire Torah that we learned in the womb, if we were holding that on a conscious level, there would be no question that I would be on fire for the Rebbeinu Shalom all day long. There would be no question. I'd be living with the whole Torah inside of me. There would be no more question. Yeah.
Could you explain that in terms of the eating of the Eitz Hadat?
So, yeah. So everything, like we've said, that initially the Adam and Chava, right, they were going to go into Gan Eden. And because of their slip, right, we always talk about this plan A and plan B. There was a plan A that we were going to go into Gan Eden and appreciate the Hashem's oneness and this Achdas Hashem, and everything would be, the bread would grow on trees. But then we slipped. There was an intentional slip that Hashem kind of put into the world that He knew would happen for us to then go through the doubt and the darkness and the existence of other, to an extent where we then by virtue of the struggle, then come to a much greater appreciation of God's oneness than we would ever have appreciated had we just gone straight right into Gan Eden. Okay, if we had straight gone into Gan Eden, we'd never have known that there's a world where it's not bread that grows on the trees, that it's wheat, and that you need like 15 steps before you can get bread. Maybe 3 days later you got bread. You know what I mean? It's like we never would have known. We never would have known there's an alternative. We never would have known that it's so difficult. So
what would be wrong with that?
What would be wrong with that? Because our connection to Hashem would be very, very superficial. Would be extremely superficial. Would be extremely superficial, our connection with Hashem, because it would be basically a coerced relationship. Because if you're paying somebody $1 million a month to be your friend, so then what do you get? What is your friendship? How great is that friendship? You're giving them $1 million a month, and they see that you're giving them $1 million a month. Of course, they call you. Of course, they hang out with you. Like what do you expect?
My parents took care of all of my needs for many, many years. Was I coerced to love them because they were taking care of all of my needs?
They were taking care of all of your needs. You're Christian. Well, I mean, that's a good example. That's an example of how we get used to things. And we take things for granted, and we don't appreciate. And isn't it a struggle too?
No, I never took my parents for granted. I never got used to them, like in that sense. I don't see, if we're living in Gan Eden, how can we be nothing but thankful of all of the benefits that there are for ourselves?
I know, but the struggle to be thankful would be very remote, would be very little. There wouldn't be such a struggle. It would be just so clear. It would just be so clear. Everything would be so clear.
You take it for granted.
But even if you couldn't take it for granted, like he's saying, you would just be thankful all day long. Great, you'd be thankful all day long. But the hurdle that you'd have to overcome in order to be thankful all day long would be almost nothing. It would be nothing. It's basically Hashem just like saying hi and let's live together. And you're like, okay, great. It's like there's no. You never know, and this is the point. You would never know that the connection that you had with Hashem was so real because it would never have been tested. It would never have been tested.
You would always have this inside thing. I want to do.
No, it wasn't an inside thing. It was an outside thing. It was the snake. It was an
It shows
outside
you were
thing.
given free will.
Yes, but the Yetzer Hara was external. It was external to them at that point.
So what does free will mean?
Free will means that it's that we have the chance to choose Hashem. That we have the chance to choose to see. We have the chance to live in the world where Hashem is really Einod Lavado. But the choice exists because there's enough darkness to allow that choice to exist.
So we didn't have free choice before Eisav.
How much do you think that the snake would have had an option, had much success had he taken Adam head on? Would you think he would have been successful had he coerced Adam? Had he talked to Adam?
No, but a bunch of reasons for that.
Well, I think the main reason is that Adam had a direct discussion with Hashem. Hashem spoke to Adam and told him exactly what the story was, and so he had no problem waiting. He had no problem, he wouldn't have been tempted by the snake. But because Chava didn't have a direct, like Hashem created Chava and then brought her to Adam without having spoken to her, and then it was up to Adam to kind of to give over the information, and Adam did it in a certain way that left Chava susceptible to the snake's temptation. And then once she fell, now she's grabbing onto Adam. And what should Adam have done? What should Adam have done? How do we fix the fate of the Eitzav? What should Adam have done? Kick her to the curb and say, sorry, guess you're not going to be in Shabbos. I guess Hashem will make me another one. I got a bunch more ribs here. You'll be, whatever. I don't know about you, but I'll be fine. Was that the tikkun of the fate? What should have Adam have done? So I think what Adam should have done.
Couldn't have done anything.
What, he couldn't have done anything? Oh, sure he could have. He could. This is what he should have said. I think this is what he should have said. In my humble opinion, this is what he should have said. Chava honey, don't worry. I talked to Hashem myself. He's going to make this all work out. I don't have any doubt. Let's go to him and let's talk to him. Let's tell him what happened, and he'll make everything right. I spoke to him. I know this is who we're dealing with. We're not dealing with. It's okay. People make mistakes. What would have happened? It would have been great. It would have been fine. But he freaked out. Chava comes to him and says, I hated it. He's like, okay, so I had this whole conversation with the Rebbe Shalom, but now you're freaking out. And so he it's like he couldn't be the Gavra there and say, listen, we're gonna go to Hashem. We're gonna go to Hashem now. His wife got him off balance. I think we've all been there. And if we have a wife, then we get off. They make us off balance, and so he fell with that. So, but the point is that it was a point. That was the point. He needed to fall, and then we go through this whole plan B. But ultimately, the plan A of blissing out in Hashem's connection with the physical world and the spiritual world united is only going to be to the degree that we saw that there was a difference, to the degree both that we saw that there was like another way, and also because we realize once the possibility for sin and tshuva come into the world, we see that our connection with Hashem is so absolute. Because if we can sin and we can do the worst things in the world and still do tshuva, then that proves that our connection to Hashem is intrinsic and absolute. But our connection to Hashem being intrinsic and absolute cannot be demonstrated unless we go and face evil and fall, and also be able to do tshuva, and that Hashem accepts that tshuva, and there's such a thing as tshuva, and that shows that our relationship with Hashem is atzmius. It's intrinsic. It's intrinsic. It's internal. It's eternal. It's nothing can damage it. So we talked about that Hashem shining this light, his Or Ein Sof, right? That's how Hashem created the world. The revelation of his wanting to create this world was this light, right? He created this light. He's the lamp, let's say. We have no idea what Hashem is. No idea what Hashem is, okay? But he makes light, okay? That's how we know him, his the light. And he also does restriction. He has the light and he also has the aperture. So he does light and he does aperture. It's not him, it's what he does. And so that so you have chesed is the light, and gvura is the restriction. And gvura is the restriction. So you have this situation where we can appreciate the light because of the restriction. And now the question is, who comes out now? Who comes out now? Who comes out now? We have chesed, we have gvura. Now what comes out? What emerges from that? What's the Toldos Yitzchok? We had Avram, we had the chesed, and we have Yitzchok, the gvura. Now what emerges from that? What emerges from that, that's basically the medium and the setting in which our world exists. Where we have light, there's light, but it's so refracted, it's so restricted. That's the chesed and the gvura. Now what's our avoda? Our avoda is either there's the tzaddik who never sinned. He sees everything, clear. It's like it's his knee jerk is to just be connected to Hashem. That's Yaakov, right? Yaakov. And then there's Eisav. There's Eisav who the avoda is let's do gvura. It's coming from Yitzchok. Let's do gvura. I want to be kovish as Yitzro. I want to deal with the bad. I want to deal with the gashmias. I want to be involved in the world. I want to be involved in the world. I want to make money and I want to be in the world. Why? In order to bring out the Eibishter. In order to show that there is no place in the physical world that is not Hashem. That is not Hashem. He has to deal with it. He has to go into it. He has to engage in the Ra, in the what seems to be separate, the separateness, the physical, the brokenness. Engage in it and bring the awareness and bring the perfection of Hashem's ultimate oneness, which is so much more perfect through multiplicity. Right? If Hashem is one and that's all, and he's just one, so that's great. But if Hashem can be one, even though he's a billion, like if you can get oneness out of a billion, that is so much cooler than getting oneness out of one. Can you just imagine? If something's one and it's just one, it's great, one. But if something's one, but it's also simultaneously infinite, it's also totally multiplicity, and yet still one is not compromised. One is not compromised despite multiplicity. Well, now that's a cool trick. And so the tzaddik Gomer, he's holding by, he's not challenged by the multiplicity. He's just holding by the one. But the Baal Tshuva, the one who has to engage in the world, the one who is troubled and challenged by the multiplicity, by the distractions, by the physical world, by all the intermediaries and being distracted by those, then coming at the end of the day to realize that it's all Hashem underneath all of that, to struggle with the distractions, to struggle with the physical, seeming the physical barriers, to say that it's really all Hashem, that is that creates a much greater connection, a much greater revelation, a much greater relationship. Am I saying? Is it making sense what I'm saying? What's? How can I say this clear?
Tshuva gets more connected than your kids who grew up with this total connection to Hashem from the beginning.
Well, I don't think Baal Tshuva means somebody who grew up from versus somebody who didn't grow up from. I think a Baal Tshuva is somebody who has to deal with evil, that they have a Yetzer Hara. We're not talking about a Baal Tshuva who grew up, eating, ham and cheese. We're talking about a Baal Tshuva, meaning everybody, basically everybody, all of the Jewish people, because we deal with bad. Just because you grew up from doesn't mean you didn't do an Aveira. Doesn't mean you didn't have to do tshuva. Doesn't mean you're dealing with the disparity, with alienation, with feeling apart from and separate from Hashem, and that this is separate from Hashem, and that my business is separate from Hashem, and my relationship with my wife is separate from Hashem, and all my kids have a power, and the landlord has power, and I'm just seeing all these various diverse things. how can I know that my relationship is with Hashem alone? That's what we're talking about. That's what Achdus Hashem is, and that's really what I want to use these shirim to also bring back to this idea of Achdus Hashem, which I believe is sorely ignored and totally misunderstood. Hashem is one, right? And we know that one, the gematria of one, is 13, and the gematria of love, Ahava, is also 13. We know that the Jewish mantra, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, which is our mission statement. What is the next? What do we say next? V'ahavta, and you should love Hashem. That the unity of Hashem means love. The unity of Hashem means love. How do we understand that? How do we understand the unity of Hashem means love? Because the unity of Hashem means there is nothing else but Hashem. You talk about your parents filling your every need. Hashem is filling our every needs. That my blood vessels are working, that my ligaments are working, that my eyes are working, that I'm getting water, that I got to eat, that I woke up, that breathe, lungs, that my nervous system, how many systems here are working? This is Hashem absolutely. 100. There is nothing else. There is my entire being. I can sit here, we can close our eyes and say that Hashem has a completely personal, direct, intimate, loving connection with me right now. Whatever I feel, if I feel my butt on my chair, my back in that's Hashem. Hashem's making me feel that. Hashem is making me feel that. There is a personal relationship. There's nothing else. That's what Achdus Hashem means. So Achdus Hashem really gives us the ability to have this personal, not just the ability, the charge, the raison d'être to be totally connected to Him, because He is the one who is really filling all of our needs every single second, every single moment. So that's what Achdus means. Achdus means that we are in love with Hashem. We're in love with Hashem. We can't get away from Him. Literally, we can't get away from Him, but we want to get away from Him. Unfortunately, because we have ourselves. We have our ego. We have our ego. Our ego stands, and our Yetzer Hara stands in between my wanting to connect to Hashem as one. Because if I have to connect to Hashem as one, then that means that I don't get to control what happens. Hashem's oneness is there's an element of bittul, of nullification. When I say that Hashem is one, it means that it's not me. It's not me. I'm not God. Okay, so that's koivishas Yitzra. We have to be koivishas Yitzra. So Eisav, the reason Yitzchok loved Eisav is because Yitzchok saw that even though while he didn't have Ra inside of him, his struggles and difficulties that he had to deal with were external to him. Him dealing with the water, him dealing with the with the wells. So Eisav was able. Eisav was this. Yaakov was the one who was just going to be a tzaddik, and Eisav was the one who was going to be the Baal Tshuva. He was the one who would have to deal with the world. He was an ish sada. He was a man of the field, and he had to engage in the world. His avoda was to engage in the world. And did he have the ability to do this? Did he have the ability to do this? So we see that now we can interpret when Rivka went to the churches or to the temples, to the idolatrous temples, and Eisav was jumping around. What was Eisav jumping around for? He was jumping around for not because he wanted to do evil, but because he wanted to be koivishas Yitzra. Because his natiyah was to fight evil, was to show that there really is nothing else but Hashem, by engaging in what looked other than Hashem, by engaging in the physical world, by engaging in the business of the world and showing there's really nothing but Hashem. So when he went by, Wall Street, or he went by the base of Avodah Zarah, Eisav was going crazy, because this was where his opportunity was. This is where his avoda was going to be. His avoda was going to be here to show, oh, you think Hashem's not here? You think there's something else but Hashem? I'll show you. The Ra is not there as an existence of itself. The Ra is there in order that we could come to a greater appreciation, a greater consciousness and awareness of how everything really is Hashem. You thought it was bad? You thought it was darkness? You thought it was other? It's all Hashem. And that mind-blowing awareness is only possible once you're handling in the Ra. Once you first experience it as something that's other, and then see, oh, it's not other, it's all Hashem. So that was what Eisav, and this is more powerful than Yaakov. This is much more powerful than Yaakov. Yaakov was Ish Chalak, right? Yaakov was Ish Chalak, and Eisav was like Bigfoot. Okay, smooth, right? He had no hair. What's hair? Hair is the hashpa. Hair is the hashpa. It symbolizes what, it grows after you die, right? That's what we learned last week. That thank you for that. And my wife also learned that like simultaneously, actually. And also the room was like, she's like, she, like couldn't believe it. Like never heard such a thing. Anyway, and so Yaakov Avinu, he's the tzaddik gomer, right? He didn't have to deal with struggle. So he also was a smooth guy. Like the hashpa that you have being the tzaddik gomer is, you're not. It's the gadol. The gadol b'Shem Yisrael. How many people know him? A few people know him. If you follow Yeshiva World News, you hear about the gadol, the Talmud Chacham. But the Eisav, the guy who deals in the world, he's the hashpa that he has, the influence, the impact that he's making in the world. He's like mamash a hairy guy. He's full of hair because that's where the hashpa in the world is. That's where people influence when they handle in the world and they uncover Hashem. And this is really the avoda of Yitzchok. The avoda of Yitzchok as opposed to Avram. Avram is chesed. Chesed is you have two fields. You have two fields, okay? Two dry, barren fields, okay? So one is you pour water on it and you make it arable by pouring water on it. You have an external irrigation system, okay? And so if land that has no arability, aside from having external irrigation, that's the only way it's going to grow. And so you just pour water on it and make sure it has water, and then it will keep growing. If you pull the water away, sorry, you have to keep the water on it. But as long as you keep the water on it, it'll grow. That's Avram. And Yishmael was like that. Yishmael did not have any internal change. Yishmael was from because he had good influence. He had a good influence. He was being watered. And so but his head was not like changed. His head was not there. But he had a good influence. Yitzchok and Gevura is not giving on top. It's uncovering. He was the avoda of uncovering the wells. What's uncovering the wells? It's not giving outside irrigation. It's saying the water is from inside. Uncover the water inside. Be a different person. Reveal yourself. Reveal the water from inside. You don't need the water. You're not getting hydrated from an external water source that when that water source dries up, you're done. Uncover the water inside. Uncover that water. That was Yitzchok. And Eisav had that ability to do so in his head. That's why Esav's head, when he was killed, it rolled into the Ma'aras HaMachpelah. And Esav's head is buried in the Ma'aras HaMachpelah, where? Being in Yitzchok's bosom. In Yitzchok's bosom is Esav's head. Because Eisav understood that his head, he had it. His body was too much. He could not stand the test. Eisav did not pass the test. He was too egotistical.
I thought the head got that gift because of his ability to be obedient with his dad.
I think that this is because this was what his job was in the world. His job initially, that's what I'm trying to say. That's what the Rebbe is saying, is that when you have Avram and you have Yitzchok, you have the light and you have the restriction. What avoda now emerges here? There's the avoda of Yaakov, of just being the tzaddik, just living life all the time in ruchnius, like not being distracted by the physical. And the other avoda is the gevura required to engage in the physical world, in the mud, and mamish turn it into gold and make it reveal Hashem in the Gashmias. And that is difficult. And that's Eisav. Eisav could have been there. He had the head for it. But apparently his body and his ego did not allow him, and he failed. He had Bechira Chavshis.
Where do you get that he had the head for this?
Because his head was buried in the Maratz Machpelah.
I know, but his father.
What happened to the rest of his
No,
body?
well,
If his father didn't choose to put him close to him, it could have been on the ground. So it was really Yitzchok who brought his head close.
Well,
to
I think
him.
Yitzchok understood that Esav had this koyach in his head, his shoresh, when he was in the womb and he was fighting to go out at the base of Avodah Zarah. Why was he fighting to get out? Because he knew that was where he needed to do his avodah. He had it, but he couldn't bring it down into his body. He had it only intellectually, but the physicality that he was subjected to was too intense for him to really bring it in. And Rivka, hearkening to our mother Sarah, who was also the one who said, okay, this is not going through Yishmael. If it was up to Avram, he would give it to everybody. He's giving it to Yishmael too. No, this has got to be Yitzchok, right? So she made it Yitzchok. Rivka also, right? When Rivka came into to the house, all the miracles that happened by Sarah reappeared. Rivka's kind of like another Sarah. She's like a second Sarah, and she also figures out, okay. Your father, he thinks it's going to be to everybody, but I know we've got it. It's just got to be you. You've got the Torah. You're learning so much better. You're going to be able to deal with the world. You need to chap his avoda. You need to chap that. You take the brachas, and you have to now do both. You now have to do both. You have to embody both the tzaddik gomer, and you have to embody the Baal Tshuva. You have to embody the kovesh Yitzchok by going out in the physical world, being a businessman, making a parnasa, raising a family, being involved in those things. You have to do that as well. You're going to have to do not just a Yoshev Oelim, but you're going to have to dig in and then he had to leave, right? He had to leave Eretz Yisrael. He had to go there. Before he left Eretz Yisrael, he probably would have never left Eretz Yisrael, Yaakov Avinu. Why didn't Yitzchok leave Eretz Yisrael? Why wasn't Yitzchok allowed to leave Eretz Yisrael? The Rebbe says something very interesting. He said that Yitzchok, his avoda was to unearth and reveal internally the koyach and the personal insides, to transform yourself. That was only possible when it itself had what to reveal, right? And so he was confined to Eretz Yisrael because he needed the kedusha that was there to empower that revelation, that digging. If he would go into Detroit, there's no. It's like the electricity's off. He wouldn't have any he wouldn't have that to dig out. He needed to be in Eretz Yisrael where the kedusha was there embedded, and he could that could power his avoda. So that's why he was constricted to Eretz Yisrael. So l'chara Yaakov, if he was this guy who was just going to be Yoshev Oyalim, he wouldn't have left Eretz Yisrael either. But since he accepted this avoda, he schapped the Eisav avoda as well, and be kovesh Yitzchok to be involved in the world. He had to go out and make a job, go get a living, go raise family.
Sounds like Rivka didn't believe in Bechira.
I think she believed in Bechira. Maybe Yitzchok didn't believe in Bechira enough because Rivka was on it, was aware.
Didn't think that Eisav could change.
I think she felt that if Eisav would have learned more Torah, he would have been that's what should have happened. He should have learned enough Torah. He should have been able to, and Yitzchok and Yaakov and Eisav would have been partners in this. It would have been the Beis Halevi says it would have been Yisachar Zvulun. It would have been a Yisachar Zvulun relationship. Yisachar stayed and learning and was the spiritual side of the operation, and Zvulun or Eisav would have gone out, made the money, be involved in politics, involved in world, strategy and all of that, and would have supported. There would have been a partnership there. But Eisav did not. He went off the derech. He could not hold the Gashmias was too much for him because he didn't learn enough Torah, and that's what Yaakov had. Yaakov had the Torah. And so since he was mamish holding by the Torah, he could be involved in the world. And Rivka saw that. Oh, okay, he got the Torah, and so he's the one who's got to get this bracha because he's the one who's going to be able to be koivishus yitzro, to take that avoda in a way that will actually work. Yeah, I mean, this is the Toldos of Yitzchok. This is the Toldos of Yitzchok. This is what Yitzchok produced. These two mahalchim, and I guess we'll continue talking in the coming weeks about what does it mean now that Yaakov Avinu has taken on this avoda. He marries both women, right? Both wives, both Rachel and Leah. He has to marry Esav's wife as well. He's taking this all on. But just that we should just remember this idea that Eisav, even though he wasn't able to achieve it, but that this avoda of Eisav, this avoda, that's what we are called on. That's what we have. This avoda that Yaakov, that we need to learn Torah in order to be able to do, but the world is here for us in order to transform, in order to make a place for Hashem to live. Ein od malvado. We have to handle in the world, in the physicality of the world, but to reveal out of it that it's really all Hashem. There's no other power but Hashem. And that revelation from that avoda is on such a much higher level, such a much more beautiful, amazing, emotional level. And that is really Achdus Hashem. That is the purpose that Hashem created the world for. If it was supposed to be easy, if there was just supposed to be light, and let's say, oh wow, light, great, I can identify light, then that would have been fine. But to know that we can get into the mud. We can get into the mud. What does it mean? Maybe. What does it mean? Freedom. Yitzias Mitzrayim. Hashem gave the Jews freedom. Freedom means that we can screw up. We can screw up really bad. We have the freedom to screw up. We have the freedom to explore. We have the freedom to engage in the physical world without ever having to worry about that we're cut off forever. We're cut off forever. As long as we believe that we have that freedom, that Hashem gave us rules, but within those rules we have absolute freedom to do what we need to do, what we need to be involved in the world. We have that freedom. Other people, no, they have to stick very close to something. You know, they don't have the Torah, they don't have Torah mitzvahs. They have to be. They can't veer off too much. Who knows what's going to be? But with a Yid, we have Torah, we can go wherever we want. We can go wherever we want. Obviously, we have to follow the Torah, but we can go in the rounds of the Torah. We can go wherever, and even if we fall, and even if we make mistakes, and even if we get distracted, and even if we go, that is part of that process is to show that we can't do anything so bad that we will not see Hashem at the end of the day, that we're rejected. Because that's the whole point. The whole point of having this avoda, of being in the physical world and revealing the achdus, revealing the oneness from the physical world, has to involve that even your failures, even your screw-ups, will just show even more how it's all Hashem. Because if our failures allowed us to be cut off, oh, come on, then it's just like, how powerful is Hashem then?
And look at all these simulations.
Right. So, but we're not at the end yet. We're not at the end. And lo nidach mimenu yidach. There's not going to be a yid who's going to be left behind. And that's what we are going towards, this expression of where through the multiplicity we will the unity, the experience of the unity of Hashem is all that much more exhilarating. So please God, we should see it sooner in our days.
All right.